Welcome to the joys that are psychology. Today we're going to talk about attachment. Okay, two early theorists that you need to know about is John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. Bowlby looks at attachment through psychoanalytic lens and comes up with 4 characteristics of attachment. The first is proximity. We want to be around the people that we're attached to. The second is safe haven. We go to the people that we're attached to when we need security. The next is a secure base. We use them as a launching point as we move forward. The last is separation distress. We feel anxiety when the people that we're attached to go away. The next person is going to be Mary Ainsworth. Mary Ainsworth is a student of Bowlby's and comes up with an experiment called the strange situation. Basically, the parent and the child are in the room, a stranger comes in, the parent is going to leave and leave the stranger alone with the child, and then the parent's going to come back. Now, how the child reacts when the parent leaves and when the parent comes back is going to determine whether or not they have secure or insecure attachment. This security or insecurity will have implications for future life and my future videos.
John Bowlby's psychological theory of attachment hypothesized that the extreme behaviors infants engage in to avoid separation from a parent or when reconnecting with a physically separated parent, like crying, screaming, and clinging, were evolutionary mechanisms. Bowlby thought these behaviors had possibly been reinforced through natural selection and enhanced the child's chances of survival. These attachment behaviors are instinctive responses to the perceived threat of losing the survival advantages that accompany being cared for and attended to by the primary caregivers. Since the infants who engaged in these behaviors were more likely to survive, the instincts were naturally selected and reinforced over generations. Later research found that infants placed in an unfamiliar situation away from their parents fell into 4 categories.
There are only 4 ways that a human being can be attached to somebody. Some of them are healthier than others. The first is secure attachment, which is the healthiest of them all. What people don't realize is that secure attachment is actually built in the first 18 months of life, depending on how the child is attached to the caregiver. The next is anxious attachment. When caregivers are inconsistent or might be on their phone a little bit too much instead of being present with their child, it can lead to a lot of fears of abandonment, and those will show up not just in childhood, but later on in life. Avoidant attachment. This is when the child begins to avoid things. They can avoid telling you things, giving you cues, and it's probably because they are afraid of what might happen. Caregivers that are angry, highly reactive, and emotional towards their child create avoidant attachment problems. And the fourth is the most dangerous, which is disorganized attachment. It's a mix of avoidant and anxious behaviors, and is usually a result of trauma. This means that the child can't really regulate their emotions because their life was pure chaos in their formative years. So parents, understand that your intimacy the first year and a half is really important.
1. Secure attachment. These infants showed distress upon separation but sought comfort and were easily comforted when parents returned. 2. Anxious resistant attachment. A smaller portion of infants experienced greater levels of distress and upon reuniting with the parents, seem both to seek comfort and to attempt to punish the parents for leaving. 3. Avoidant attachment. Infants in the third category showed no stress or minimal stress upon separation from the parents and either ignored the parents upon reuniting or actively avoided the parents. 4. In later years, researchers added a 4th attachment style to this list. The disorganized, disoriented attachment style, which refers to children who have no predictable pattern of attachment behaviors. The ways in which children reacted were primarily influenced by the behaviors of their caregivers, and in turn greatly influenced how they interact with and bond with others throughout their lives. One of the greatest areas of influence attachment style will impact on adulthood is romantic relationships.
I was today years old when I learned what daddy issues means. Sexual desire for men who act as father figures. Bro, I have been out here telling people I have daddy issues because my dad left. Bro, I'm gay. Yo, why did nobody correct me? I have abandonment issues. Fuck.
When a woman does anything undesirable, particularly that which is sexual, such as sleeping with more than one partner, having messy relationships, being clingy, or wanting constant attention, she will be accused of having daddy issues.
Let's talk about daddy issues really quick, okay? This is a term that's used when somebody has emotional or psychological issues stemming from a problematic or...
This claim is even racialized, as it is often leveraged at Black women under the assumption that they have absentee fathers. Rather than blaming the men who abandoned their families, the concept of daddy issues both sexualizes the mental anguish of women who grew up without fathers and places the blame on those women for having that response. Not only is daddy issues not a recognized psychological issue, but it serves to dehumanize, sexualize, and demean women's mental health issues. The sexualization of women with mental illness is nothing new. Quite simply, it is viewed as hot and attractive when it makes the woman easier to manipulate, or hypersexual. Many mental illnesses and traumatic or impactful life experiences lead to a fear of abandonment and anxious attachment style, which can manifest in dependency and a desire to please others, traits which are often sexualized and therefore desired.
The hypersexualization of women with mental illnesses has got to stop. Personally, I think this fetish is derived from a lack of consent. I think that there's an idea if you're with a woman who is experiencing, say, mania, she will have a heightened sexual desire, as is customary with people who experience mania, and that she isn't as in charge of her faculties. It is easier to manipulate her, and she is embodying the nymphomaniac stereotype. It is the blurred lines of consent that makes the mentally ill woman so attractive to the male gaze. When men see women in these altered states where they are not as in charge of their faculties, many of them see it as an opportunity. Like in The Idol, in that now infamous scene where Jocelyn is confiding in her friend and she says that the weekend's R-wordy vibe is what attracts her. As the audience, the implication is she's so out of her mind that she finds this attractive. But this is not the case at all. Even women who are experiencing mental health difficulties do not want that. That is entirely the male gaze. It's also based on the Madonna whore complex. The idea that a woman in an altered state is more likely to engage in kinky behaviors, as evidenced by The Idol, than a woman who is sober or not struggling with mental health difficulties. From the surveyor's perspective, when we see a woman struggling with mental health, we often project hypersexuality onto her, as if a woman who is sexual, it goes back to some hysteria stereotypes as well. Like, for instance, a couple years ago, there was a controversy with the Queen's Gambit, that when Beth in the show was having mental health and substance abuse issues, she was portrayed as hypersexual in a way that if the character was male, he wouldn't have. I do not consider The Queen's Gambit nor The Idol to be feminist masterpieces, but I find it so fascinating that we project hypersexuality onto women when we are depicting mental illnesses, as if only a woman who is in that altered state could act like that, and that women in altered states are hypersexual. Both are misogynistic and anti-mental health.
Meanwhile, men who have mommy issues, defined typically as resulting in misogynistic attitudes, immaturity, constant communication and prioritization of his mother over other relationships, entitlement and insecurity, are not treated as anything more than a joke. While women's daddy issues typically result in behavior which is self-damaging and harmful to themselves and yet beneficial to those around them, men who have mommy issues are rightfully viewed as having a detrimental issue which is the fault of their mothers in some way.
Let's talk about mommy issues really quick, okay? This is a term that comes from when somebody has emotional or psychological problems stemming from a dysfunctional relationship with their mother. And if you have mommy issues, this can really disrupt when you try to form romantic or even platonic relationships in your adult life. Now, in men, this can look like somebody who is emotionally distant. They have a hard time expressing their feelings. They could be controlling or possessive because they have a fear of losing people and just hold on to them a little bit too tight. And it can also just leads to a lot of rejection. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can go about fixing mommy issues, but this involves a lot of shadow work and healing your inner child that most people just aren't willing to do.
Although labeled based on the parent of the opposite sex, anyone can have an avoidant or anxious relationship with either parent, resulting in similar issues. The labeling of mommy or daddy issues is a form of unnecessary genderization, which is meant to place heightened importance on the formation of a nuclear family and on the mother's role in maintaining it. With daddy issues, the mother is assumed to have failed in some way to retain the father.
Please, this is not your fault.
You're right. It's not my fault. It's your fault!
Little blame is placed on the father himself in the same way that men typically are free to abandon their families as a result of being less involved with child rearing, as well as the social implications that follow women who abandon their families. In the case of mommy issues, the mother is blamed for overstepping, for not recognizing boundaries, and for continuing to place her identity and self-importance in the lives of her children. Those overbearing mothers are certainly annoying to others in the lives of their children and even disruptive to their sons, but you'll notice that there is a gender divide in how mothers have disordered relationships with their children. While boys tend to be coddled and cared for, female children often have strained relationships due to criticisms about how they look, act, or live their lives. These problems can occur due to intergenerational changes in the opportunities women now have, and the historical expectations placed upon them. Other issues stem from a continued influence of patriarchy on a woman's behavior and personality. Ross G. Hasseldine, a counselor that specializes in mother-daughter relationships, writes, "The silencing of women's needs is an intergenerational dynamic that gets passed on from mother to daughter because the mother is not able to teach her daughter how to voice her needs openly and honestly. When the daughter is expected, often unconsciously, to listen for and meet her mother's unvoiced and unacknowledged needs, the daughter is learning to become an expert on understanding what her mother needs, not on what she needs herself. This means that the daughter will grow up to be as emotionally mute as her mother, thus setting up her future daughter to try to learn to interpret and meet her unvoiced needs." Quite simply, both mommy and daddy issues are directly or indirectly blamed on the mother and or daughter, and rarely on the sons and fathers. Even more rare is a desire to read into the role gender has in these problems, both in how they are perceived by others and how they affect children and parents alike. While terms such as mommy issues or daddy issues can be a shorthand for problematic behavior, it's important to recognize that a difficult relationship with one's parents is often more complicated than it first seems, as well as to recognize the linguistic trap of compiling personal faults as being primarily due to parental actions. This, dear viewers, is where we part. The one thing that happens all the time when you work with children is you're consistently sick. So, yay me, I'm losing my voice. Apologies for not being able to post more. I was hoping to do a 12 Days of Christmas type thing, but that's not going to happen. So I'm going to hopefully post a couple videos over the next couple days and hopefully some live streams because I'm spending the holidays at home. On this topic, I didn't really go into it, but also I think it's important to note just the roles that women and men play in child rearing because men typically aren't as active in the lives of their children. There are exceptions. One of the men that I am babysitting for, he spends his off time with his daughter. He spends a lot of time with his daughter. And that's honestly very rare because when I typically am babysitting, I talk pretty much only to the mom. I haven't even met the fathers of some of the kids that I watch. And that's not uncommon. But besides that, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.